Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 95.1 FM, 790 AM KFYO. We go to the phones. He's been joining us throughout the Texas legislative session, and we'll be visiting with him throughout the rest of the year, as well as the 2020 Democrats continue their march towards the presidential election. And joining us on the phones from our friends over at the Texas Tribune, it's Patrick Svitek. Patrick, good morning. How are you today?
Doing great. Good morning, Chad.
Hey, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. And like I told you earlier, do appreciate you joining us throughout the session this year. Patrick, over at the Tribune, I guess y'all spent the first part of the week doing a few wrap-ups and taking a look back on the legislative session. As someone who's covered, numerous legislative sessions, you've been watching these politicians down in Austin for a while now. Did anything stand out to you? What did you take away from this session down in Austin?
Yeah, I mean, it ended on a generally positive and generally undramatic note in that they got done. Those state leaders at least got done the big things they wanted to get done. There were no major blow-ups along the way. There was not a lot of suspense about whether we have to go to like a special session and kind of an overtime round just to finish the agenda. The only real kind of drama on the last day or towards the end of the session was Governor Abbott's Secretary of State nominee not getting a confirmation vote in the Senate. But that in many ways was anticipated and wasn't, kind of like any kind of real plot twist. So otherwise, it was a pretty undramatic end to the session. Like I said, a generally positive conclusion, at least for the people at the top who were pushing for kind of landmark legislation on school finance and property taxes. Yeah,
Patrick, y'all put out a piece earlier in the week, the winners and the losers for the legislative session, and I was surprised as watching this play out. The kumbaya tone, it sort of held throughout the session. And the folks over like at Empower Texans and some of the conservative groups, I was watching them all year to see how much they really liked Dennis Bonnen as Speaker of the House. And the relationship kind of held throughout the session. And now, Patrick, it seems they don't like him very much.
Yeah, that's putting it lightly. That's true. I mean, some of those groups are very bitterly disappointed, again to put it lightly, about the outcome of the session. A lot of their priorities did not make it past the finish line or died in the House, like the ban on taxpayer-funded lobbying, which actually got a vote on the House floor, but the vote was unsuccessful. And then there were a number of other items that were never scheduled for a vote on the House floor, like there was a big elections bill, SB 9, that those groups are pushing for. And so, yeah, a number of their priority bills didn't make it across the finish line. The question that I have, is, they're upset, but, what does it matter at this point? I mean, they in the past have spent a lot of money in primaries. They didn't have a really strong track record of wins in the last primary season. And this time around, I'm not seeing, at least as of right now, a huge appetite for a really bloody primary season in terms of people stepping up to run, and lawmakers being particularly, appearing particularly vulnerable in some of these primaries. Right now, what I hear about the immediate, kind of political ramifications of this session is we got to focus on the general election. Yeah. Democrats are only 9 seats away from the majority in the House. So it's interesting to see. They are, those groups that you mentioned, obviously disappointed. It'll be very interesting to see how much they put that disappointment into action in the primary season and how impactful it could be.
Well, and Patrick, I mean, by watching this, there are groups who are mad at Speaker Dennis Bonnen. The lieutenant governor and the governor, they didn't press for the issues either, right? I mean, there was, this was, we talked about it at the very beginning of the session. This was a meat and potatoes session, and the governor, I never heard him really push for the taxpayer-funded lobbying ban. I didn't hear the lieutenant governor really push that hard for it as well. It seems like the anger is pointed at Dennis Bonnen, but No, there was no real push. I mean, outside of the, if you want to call it grassroots effort, there was no push by any of the lawmakers to really focus on those issues, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, yeah, whether it's Dennis Bonnen, Greg Abbott, or Dan Patrick, I mean, they did not put a huge emphasis on those kinds of issues. Dan Patrick, I guess to his credit, within the context of this conversation, did put out a list of 30 legislative priorities earlier in the session that I believe included some of these issues that these groups are now worked up about. And so I guess he maybe a little more than those two other guys did his part to elevate them. And I think most of them did pass the Senate. And so, but, you're right. I mean, in terms of where you direct that blame, you got to take into account the full trio of state leaders who just by and large did not appear very eager to fight for some of these more controversial bills this session.
Patrick, do you think that, with the focus being on the property tax reform, with the focus being on school finance, was this a bid by lawmakers to, yes, fix some things that they thought needed to be fixed, but also do no harm, don't really tick off too many people, especially maybe moderate voters, and let's focus on winning in 2020?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that you could look at this in the context going all the way back to the 2017 session when there were a lot of controversial bills on the table. Every week there was a headline about like the sanctuary cities ban, about the quote bathroom bill. I think they wanted to do the exact opposite of that in terms of the just kind of daily rhythm and week-to-week rhythm of the session. And I think they were very successful in that regard. And then obviously after the 2017 session, you had the 2018 elections where Democrats picked up 12 seats in the state house. And I think that continued to set that tone, or continued to kind of lock in that desire to avoid some of the more controversial bills. And as you pointed out earlier, now they're heading into the 2020 elections with Democrats 9 seats removed from the majority. And so, I think that politics is definitely factored into it. But as you pointed out, I think these are also big issues that they've tried to tackle for a long time. And I think the stars aligned in some ways as well for that to finally happen.
Yeah, very interesting. Patrick Svitek joining us with the Texas Tribune right now. Patrick, something that I know you've been focusing on big time is the Democrats, the Texas Democrats who are running for president. Anything new with Beto O'Rourke or Julian Castro as they try to bump up in the polls and get some headlines out there?
Yeah, with Beto O'Rourke, there were two significant developments this week. Earlier this week, he put out an immigration plan. I've had some time to review it now, and there's not too much in there that he hasn't talked, in terms of the big idea that he hasn't talked about before. He added some more details, basically put a little more meat on the bones, but, just important in the context of his campaign in that he sees a need to continue to get more detailed on policy. This is his second policy rollout after a climate change plan that he put out several weeks ago. And so clearly he's continuing, like a lot of these candidates, continuing to feel the pressure to get more detailed in what they would do if elected president. So that was one significant event this week. Another one came this morning, actually. His campaign announced that they now have 44 staffers in Iowa, which is nearly tripling the staffing level in Iowa that they had previously announced. And previously, I think in late April, said they were up to 16 staffers. And so that, I think, really shows how seriously they are looking at Iowa as kind of a springboard for his primary campaign. And of course, Iowa's the first, is the first state to go. And so every campaign looks at it seriously. But I think if you look at that staffing level, if you look at how many times he's already visited the state compared to some of the other early voting states, if you look at that staffing level, particularly compared to the staffing level in New Hampshire and South Carolina, it's clear that Iowa is a big, big priority for him. And I think his campaign has long seen a lot of opportunity in Iowa. It's the kind of state that candidates like him who are really into, retail-heavy politicking, it's a state that candidates like him have done very well in before. It's a state that Ted Cruz won, obviously, in 2016 Republican primary, again, because Ted Cruz at the time was very good at going everywhere, talking to everyone, shaking hands, and had really, by the end of that process, become a good retail politician.
Yeah. Patrick, you had the former vice president who was in Texas earlier this week. Are we going to see, I know we've already seen, the kind of the first round of candidates swing through Texas, do some fundraisers and speak at different events. Are we going to continue to see that here in this state where the top Democrats for president are going to be swinging through Texas?
Yeah, I anticipate that we're going to continue to see that. I mean, I think we're going to continue to see the main reason for them to come for fundraising, but it's always interesting to see if when they come for fundraising, whether they make the decision to tack on, a public event or to do an event with the local party or the state party or something like that. And I think we're going to continue to see that, again, them coming to raise money, but them also seeing some opportunity in adding some additional events onto their trip. Joe Biden, you mentioned, for example, his main reason for visiting Houston and Dallas this week were for fundraisers there. But in Houston, he decided to have this town hall with the American Federation of Teachers that was open to AFT members in Houston and was really an opportunity for him to court that very powerful national teachers union. And so choosing Houston as a backdrop for that, I think, was not insignificant. And so I think we're going to continue to see that, again, the fundraising, but also some effort to add some events that actually are aimed at building public support in the state.
Yeah, absolutely. Patrick, tell folks what you're working on and what people can find at texastribune.org.
Yeah, at the Tribune, we are still going through the aftermath of the session, covering some policy and political stories as a result of that. And then we're obviously gearing up to more closely cover the 2020 election cycle. So you can all check it out at texastribune.org.
All right. Patrick, as always, appreciate your time, and we'll visit with you as the 2020 election continues.
Thanks, Chad.
Thank you. That's Patrick Svitek of the Texas Tribune.